The silent graveyard. Captain Maya Chen pressed her palm against the cold viewport of the exploration vessel Horizon's Edge, watching the stars shimmer in the vast emptiness of space. 3 months they had been traveling to the outer reaches of Sector Gamma 7, following the last known trajectory of the most feared military force in the galaxy. The Draconian Imperial fleet had vanished without sending a single distress signal, leaving behind only questions and terrifying silence. "Captain, we're approaching the coordinates," called out Lieutenant Torres from the navigation station. His voice carried a tremor that he tried to hide. Everyone aboard knew the stories about the Draconians. They were ruthless conquerors who had enslaved entire star systems, their black ships appearing like death itself across the cosmos. For them to simply disappear meant something far worse than pirates or engine failure. Maya turned from the window and walked to the command chair. At 35, she was young for a deep space captain, but her steady hands and sharp mind had earned her this assignment. The United Earth Defense Council needed answers, and they needed them from someone who wouldn't crack under pressure. The fate of human expansion into this sector depended on understanding what had happened here. "All stop," Maya ordered. "Begin long-range sensor sweep." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of electronics. Chief Science Officer Dr. James Wright hunched over his console, his weathered face illuminated by cascading data streams. He had spent 40 years studying alien technology, but nothing had prepared him for this mission. The readings coming through were unlike anything in their databases. "Captain," Wright said slowly, "I'm detecting massive metallic signatures ahead. Hundreds of them, scattered across a region roughly 2 light hours wide." He paused, checking his instruments again. "They're not moving. No energy signatures. No communications. It's like they're all just floating." Maya felt ice form in her stomach. Hundreds of ships meant the entire Draconian fleet. The fact that they were all dead in space confirmed their worst fears. Something had been powerful enough to destroy the galaxy's most advanced military force. "Take us in slowly," she commanded. "All departments, maximum alert. I want every sensor recording everything." As the Horizon's Edge crept forward, the first shapes began to resolve on the main screen. What they saw defied explanation. Massive Draconian warships hung motionless in the void, their hulls intact but scarred with strange markings. Some vessels floated upside down, others spun slowly in lazy circles. The formation that had once struck fear across the galaxy now looked like toys scattered by a giant child. "My God," whispered Communications Officer Sarah Kim. "There must be 500 ships out there." Maya studied the display. The Draconian fleet had been arranged in perfect military formation when they entered this sector. Now they drifted randomly, as if something had simply turned off every system simultaneously. No explosion damage, no signs of battle. Just silence. "Right. Are you detecting any life signs?" Maya asked. "Negative, Captain. No biological readings from any of the vessels. But that's not the strangest part." Wright adjusted his scanner settings. "I'm reading massive power cores that are still active, but they're not connected to any systems. It's like someone disconnected the engines, weapons, and life support, but left the reactors running." The implication sent chills through the bridge crew. The Draconians were known for their fail-safe systems. Their ships would never simply shut down without reason. Something had systematically disabled the most powerful fleet in known space. "Captain," Torres called out, "I'm reading a vessel that's significantly larger than the others, roughly 12 kilometers long. The configuration matches intelligence reports for the Draconian command ship Voidrender." Maya nodded grimly. The Voidrender was the flagship of Fleet Admiral Korthak, the Draconian commander who had personally overseen the conquest of 17 systems. If they were going to find answers, that ship would be the place to start. "Plot an intercept course. We're going aboard." 20 minutes later, Maya led a 4-person boarding team through the airlock connecting their ship to the massive Draconian vessel. The corridor beyond was dimly lit by emergency lighting, casting long shadows that seemed to move independently. The air was breathable, but carried a strange metallic taste that made everyone's skin crawl. "The layout matches our intelligence files," reported Security Chief Marcus Rodriguez, consulting his handheld scanner. "The command center should be 17 levels up, Section 12. As they moved through the ship, the silence became oppressive. Their footsteps echoed strangely, as if the sound was being absorbed by the walls themselves. Most disturbing was the complete absence of bodies. The Draconians were large, reptilian beings who rarely left their posts during crisis situations. The fact that they were all gone suggested either mass evacuation or something far worse. They found the first clue in what appeared to be a crew quarters section. The rooms were small and spartanly furnished, typical of military vessels. But scratched into the metal walls of several rooms were symbols that didn't match any known Draconian script. The markings were deep and jagged, carved with desperate strength. "Right, can you make sense of these?" Maya asked, running her gloved fingers over the scratches. The scientist took detailed photographs and ran them through his translation software. After several minutes, he looked up with confusion. "Captain, these aren't Draconian. They're not in our databases at all. But the pattern suggests they were made by multiple individuals, all carving the same symbols repeatedly. What do you think they were trying to communicate?" "If I had to guess, I'd say it was some kind of warning. Or maybe a prayer." They continued deeper into the ship, finding more evidence of panic. Equipment was scattered in corridors, as if dropped by fleeing crew members. Computer terminals displayed error messages in Draconian script, most reporting system failures across all departments. But still no bodies, no blood, no sign of what had caused such widespread terror. The command center was a vast, circular room dominated by a raised platform, where the ship's senior officers would have stood. Multiple display screens surrounded the space, most now dark or flickering with static. Maya's team spread out to examine different stations while she approached the captain's chair. "Captain," Rodriguez called from a communications console. "I found something. The ship's logs are still intact." Maya hurried over as Rodriguez activated the playback system. A holographic display materialized, showing the bridge as it had been during the final hours. Draconian officers moved frantically between stations, their normally disciplined behavior replaced by obvious panic. The audio was in the Draconian language, but Wright's translator began providing subtitles. The conversation was fragmented, but the meaning was clear. "Fleet Admiral, we've lost contact with battle groups 7 and 9. All ships report the same phenomenon. Their crews simply stopped responding. Sir, we're detecting massive gravitational distortions throughout the fleet formation. The distortions aren't natural. Something is manipulating space itself around us." The recording jumped forward, showing fewer officers on the bridge. Those remaining looked exhausted and terrified. "Admiral Korthak is no longer responding to commands. None of the senior staff are responding. They're all in their quarters, but they won't answer communications. We need to evacuate the remaining crew to the escape pods. The pods won't launch. Something is preventing any ship from leaving the formation." The final section of the recording showed only 2 Draconian officers on the entire bridge. One was slumped over his console, apparently unconscious. The other was speaking directly to the recording device. "This is Sub-Commander Vex of the Imperial Fleet. If anyone finds this recording, do not attempt to enter this sector. Something inhabits the space here, something that feeds on consciousness itself. It doesn't destroy ships or kill bodies. It takes minds, leaves the flesh behind like empty shells. We tried to fight it, but you cannot battle something that exists in the space between thoughts." The officer looked directly at the camera, his reptilian features twisted with fear. "It's coming for me now. I can feel it pressing against my mind, trying to get inside. When you find our ships, you will find them intact but empty. That is its signature. Perfect preservation of everything except the spark that makes us alive. Warn your people. Warn everyone. Do not let curiosity lead you to share our fate. The recording ended abruptly, leaving Maya's team in stunned silence. How is that possible? Torres whispered. Something that can attack minds directly across an entire fleet. Wright was studying his scanner readings with growing alarm. Captain, I'm detecting unusual quantum fluctuations throughout this sector. The fabric of space-time itself has been altered somehow. If this entity the Draconian described can manipulate reality at that level, but it didn't work, Maya realized, because it wasn't really a virus at all. Rodriguez, who had been monitoring the corridor behind them, suddenly grabbed Maya's shoulder. Captain, we've got movement. Multiple contacts approaching our position. Through the doorway, they could see figures moving in the darkened corridor. At first glance, they appeared to be Draconian crew members, but something was fundamentally wrong with the way they moved. Their steps were too precise, too coordinated, like marionettes being controlled by a single puppeteer. The records mention this, Wright whispered urgently. The entity doesn't kill its hosts. It keeps their bodies functional, while using them as extensions of itself. Those crew members have been walking around this ship for months, animated by something that isn't them anymore. Maya counted at least a dozen figures moving through the corridor, all heading directly for their location. Their options were limited. The secondary data core was in a dead-end section with only one exit, and that exit was now blocked by things that wore the faces of the dead. Is there another way out of here? She asked Wright, who was still frantically searching through the ship's blueprints. There's a maintenance shaft that leads to the lower engineering sections, he reported. But Captain, I need more time to understand what we're dealing with. These records describe technology that shouldn't be possible. The figures in the corridor had stopped moving, but Maya could sense they were waiting for something. In the unnatural silence, she could hear that breathing sound again, stronger now, as if whatever produced it was getting closer. Right, give me the short version. What exactly are we fighting? The scientist's hands shook as he pulled up the final entries in the Draconian database. According to their analysis, it's not a creature in any conventional sense. It's a form of distributed consciousness that exists in the quantum foam of space itself. The ancient civilization that built those ruins found a way to preserve their collective mind after their bodies died. They've been waiting in the empty spaces between atoms for someone to give them a way back into the physical universe. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's failing life support. You're saying we're dealing with the ghosts of an entire dead civilization? Worse than ghosts, Captain. They're hungry. They've been alone in the quantum void for millions of years, and they want to experience physical existence again. But they can't create new bodies, so they take existing ones and wear them like clothing. The breathing sound was getting louder, and Maya realized it wasn't coming from the walls anymore. It was coming from the corridor where the possessed Draconian crew members waited. All of them were breathing in perfect synchronization, as if controlled by a single set of lungs. The maintenance shaft, Maya decided. We're leaving now. But as they moved toward the access panel Wright had identified, the lights throughout the section began to flicker in a pattern that was almost like Morse code. Wright's translator began picking up signals from the ship's communication system, even though no one was operating the equipment. Captain, Wright said with growing horror, it's trying to communicate with us directly. The message that appeared on their screens was in perfect English, which should have been impossible for any Draconian system to produce. We have been alone for so long. Your minds are warm and bright in the cold emptiness. We do not wish to harm you. We only wish to remember what it feels like to be alive. Let us share your thoughts, and you can share our knowledge of the universe. Maya stared at the message, understanding that they were being offered a bargain by something that had already proven it couldn't be trusted. The Draconians had likely received similar offers before their fleet was consumed. Right. Is there any way to fight this thing? Any weakness the Draconians discovered? The scientist was scrolling through tactical reports when he suddenly stopped. Captain, there's one entry here that's different from the others. It's from a junior officer who managed to resist the entity's influence longer than most. He reports that the consciousness becomes vulnerable when it's actively trying to possess someone. There's a moment when it has to fully commit to entering a new mind, and during that time, it can't maintain control of its other hosts. Maya began to understand the desperate plan forming in her mind. So if we could somehow force it to focus on one of us, the others might have a chance to escape and warn Earth about what's waiting out here. Right finished. Maya felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. They had found their answer, but it was far worse than anyone had imagined. An enemy that could strip away consciousness itself while leaving bodies and ships intact represented a threat that conventional weapons couldn't touch. We need to get this information back to Earth immediately, she decided. Begin emergency data transmission to Fleet Command. Full priority. But as Torres attempted to establish communication with their home base, his face went pale. Captain, I can't get a signal out. Something is jamming all subspace frequencies. The bridge lights flickered once, then again. In the silence that followed, they could hear something that shouldn't exist in the vacuum of space. A sound like breathing, slow and deep, coming from the walls themselves. Maya realized with growing horror that they might have just discovered why the Draconian fleet had never escaped this sector. And now, they were trapped here too. The thing that hunts in darkness. The breathing sound grew stronger, seeming to come from every surface of the Draconian command ship. Captain Maya Chen felt her heart rate spike as she realized their situation had changed from investigation to survival. Whatever had consumed the minds of 500,000 Draconian warriors was still here, and it had noticed their presence. Everyone back to the horizon's edge. Now, Maya ordered, her voice cutting through the growing tension. But as her team moved toward the airlock, Security Chief Rodriguez stopped dead in his tracks. Captain, look at this, he said, pointing to his scanner. I'm reading life signs. Dozens of them, all over the ship. Wright checked his own instruments, confusion replacing fear on his weathered face. That's impossible. We swept this entire vessel. There were no biological readings when we boarded. The implications hit Maya like a physical blow. Either their equipment had malfunctioned catastrophically, or something was creating life signs that hadn't been there before. Neither option offered comfort. Torres, get us back to our ship immediately, she commanded, but the young lieutenant was staring at his communicator with a look of growing panic. Captain, I can't raise the horizon's edge. All communications are dead. It's like our ship just vanished. Through the viewport of the Draconian bridge, they could see their vessel still docked exactly where they had left it. But something was wrong with its lights. The normal blue glow of human technology had shifted to a sickly yellow color that pulsed with an irregular rhythm. Wright was frantically scanning their surroundings when he suddenly went rigid. Captain, the life signs I'm detecting. They're not random. They're moving in formation, converging on our position. Maya made a decision that went against every protocol in the book. Instead of trying to reach their compromised ship, she led her team deeper into the Draconian vessel, searching for answers that might keep them alive. They found a secondary data core 3 levels down, its systems still functional despite the ship's apparent abandonment. Right, can you access their records? I need to know more about what happened here. The scientist's fingers flew over the alien interface, his years of experience with xenotechnology finally paying off. After several tense minutes, he managed to crack the security protocols and display the ship's final records. What they found painted a picture of horror that exceeded their worst expectations. The Draconian fleet had entered this sector following reports of ancient ruins on a dead planet. Archaeological teams had discovered structures that predated known galactic civilization by millions of years. The ruins contained technology that seemed to blur the line between science and something far more disturbing. Look at this entry, Wright said, highlighting a section of text. 3 days after the archaeological team made contact with the ruins, they stopped reporting. When a rescue team was sent, they found the archaeologists standing motionless in the central chamber, their eyes open but unresponsive. They were alive but completely empty. Maya leaned closer to read the translated text. According to the records, Fleet Admiral Korthak had ordered a full quarantine of the planet, but it was already too late. Something had awakened in those ancient structures, something that had been waiting patiently for organic minds to discover it. It spread through the fleet like a virus, Wright continued, but not a biological one. It was a consciousness that could jump between minds, learning and growing stronger with each new host. The Draconians tried everything. They isolated infected crew members, cut communications between ships, even prepared to destroy the entire fleet rather than let it escape. The possessed Draconians in the corridor began moving again, their coordinated steps echoing through the ship's hull. But Maya had made her decision. As the captain, the responsibility for her crew's survival rested with her. More importantly, someone had to get word back to Earth about the threat that waited in this sector. "Right, Rodriguez Torres," she said quietly. "I need you to get back to the horizon's edge and find a way to send a warning to Fleet Command. Tell them to quarantine this entire region. No one else can be allowed to make contact with that planet." "Captain, we're not leaving you here," Rodriguez protested. "That's an order, Chief. This thing wants fresh minds to inhabit. I'm going to give it what it wants, but on my terms." Maya activated her personal communicator and set it to broadcast on all frequencies. If the entity was listening through the ship's systems, it would hear every word. "I know you can hear me," she said calmly. "You want to experience life through human consciousness. I'm offering you a trade. Take my mind, and let my crew go free. They're no threat to you, and one human consciousness should be enough to satisfy your curiosity." The breathing sound stopped abruptly, replaced by a silence so complete it felt oppressive. Then, slowly, a new voice began speaking through the ship's communication system. It was Maya's own voice, but with an inflection she had never used. "Your offer is interesting, Captain Chen. But why would we accept one mind when we could have four? Your crew members have such different thoughts, such varied experiences. The young navigator dreams of exploring distant stars. The scientist yearns to understand the fundamental nature of reality. The security chief carries memories of battles and loss that would be fascinating to experience." Maya felt cold sweat on her forearms as she realized the entity had already been probing their minds, learning about each crew member's deepest thoughts and desires. But she had to maintain the bluff. "Because I'm the one in command here. If you want cooperation instead of resistance, you deal with me." The lights flickered again, and Maya could sense something vast and ancient focusing its attention on her specifically. When it spoke again, the voice carried harmonics that seemed to bypass her ears and speak directly to her brain. "Very well, Captain. But understand that once we begin, there is no stopping the process. Your consciousness will be preserved, but it will be joined with ours. You will experience the memories of 1,000,000 dead civilizations, see the birth and death of galaxies, understand truths that would drive lesser minds to madness." Maya looked at her crew one final time, seeing her own determination reflected in their faces. "Get out of here," she ordered. "Whatever happens next, make sure Earth knows what's waiting in this sector." As her team reluctantly began moving toward the maintenance shaft, Maya closed her eyes and waited for the ancient consciousness to make its move. She could feel something pressing against the edges of her mind, testing her mental defenses like a surgeon probing for the best place to make an incision. The last thing she heard before the entity fully engaged was the sound of her crew escaping through the maintenance system. Whatever happened to her now, they would survive to carry the warning back to humanity. But as the alien consciousness began to merge with her own thoughts, Maya realized that the entity had revealed more about itself than it intended. In its eagerness to possess her mind, it had lowered its own defenses, giving her access to its true nature and capabilities. And what she discovered in those final moments of individual consciousness would either save humanity or doom it to the same fate as the Draconian fleet.